In the last video, we talked about what starts happening when your life begins improving. You start doing better, but instead of building on that momentum, you start easing off. You're still showing up and doing what's necessary, but not in the same way that you used to. For instance, you start procrastinating on things that you used to just do. You start negotiating with yourself more. You stop holding yourself to the same standard that you were holding yourself to just a few weeks ago. And then you feel like you've lost momentum despite the fact that it was your own actions or inaction that got you there. So the real question becomes, how do you start training yourself to handle more without quitting every time it gets harder? Because this ain't just about understanding why things feel harder. It's about training yourself to stay engaged when it gets harder. And there are specific ways to do that. Because at some point, if your life is going to expand, you're going to have to handle more than you've been handling. When you first start changing something in your life, effort feels easier because there's urgency, there's motivation, there's a sense that you're finally taking control. You make decisions faster. You follow through on things that you used to avoid. You start stacking small wins, and all that feels good, right? But after a while, all that changes because the same actions that felt meaningful at the beginning, they just start feeling like more responsibility added on to an already chaotic life. Now, you're waking up earlier and it doesn't feel exciting. You're just tired. Now, you have better standards and it doesn't feel rewarding. It just feels more challenging. Now, you're doing the work and there's nothing happening yet, and so it's boring. When you get to that point, you're more apt to sabotage your progress. You'll put off something that you would have handled immediately a few weeks ago, or you'll skip doing something small and tell yourself that it's just not that big of a deal. It's just not that big a deal. You tell yourself that you'll tighten up tomorrow, or the worst, Monday. But tomorrow keeps moving, and then a few days turn into a week turns into a month, and now you're back operating at a level that you were trying to move past. And I'll just call it what it is. It's quitting. Like, even though it doesn't feel like quitting when it's happening, it feels like you're just giving yourself a break. The desire to take your foot off the gas and give yourself a break is going to show up right when the life that you're creating starts asking more from you. Because let's face it, we are where we are in life because we live in a zone of comfort. And when we want to get out of that zone of comfort, it comes with life asking more of us. More responsibility, more expectations, more discipline, more focus. All things that should move you forward. But those things also create a heavier workload. Now your decisions matter more. Your consistency matters more. Your standards matter more. And if you haven't trained yourself to handle that increase yet, then you're going to start looking for relief. You're going to start easing back into your comfort zone. You're going to start reducing the pressure that you're applying to yourself because you're not used to living at that level yet. And that urge for relief is usually the signal that you need to dig in and prove that you can stay there when it gets difficult. That's how you're going to build capacity to live at the level that you want to get to. Everybody gets used to carrying a certain level of responsibility in their life, a certain pace, a certain standard for how they live. That becomes what feels manageable. And so when you start raising that, it doesn't feel natural. It feels like you're having to push more or try harder just to maintain progress. And when something feels like that, your mind starts looking for ways to make it easier. And that leads into hesitation. That leads into distractions, loss of focus, small compromises. You're not fully quitting yet, but you just stop holding yourself to the same standard. Now, when real change begins, you can operate at a higher level for a while just on willpower alone. But until your nervous system adapts, it's going to be challenging. And if every time it starts to feel challenging, you ease up or you step back, then your capacity is never going to expand, which means the version of you that you're trying to become never actually becomes normal. So if your life pretty much stays in the same place, that's because you either quit or you take a step back when life starts demanding more from you. And this is how people, myself included, end up restarting their lives over and over and over. Next Monday becomes next month. Next month becomes a specific day next month. And then all of that just becomes in the new year. Like, you get momentum in the beginning. You start improving. Life begins opening up. And then effort increases. And so you ease off and you revert back into what feels manageable. And from there, frustration builds. And then you get motivated again. You tighten back up. You push hard for a while. But then the cycle repeats. And years go by like this. From the outside, it looks like you're trying. But internally, you never trained yourself to stay engaged when effort increased. So your life keeps resetting to the same range, to the same life that you're trying to grow out of. So the way this changes is this. You have to start treating capacity like something you train. You have to start learning how to stay engaged when effort feels like it's increasing. Or a better way to say it, you have to learn how to keep going when the thing that you've been doing feels harder than it has previously. And that might mean finishing something you would have normally pushed off. It might mean checking yourself when you notice your standards are slipping. One way to interrupt this is you have to notice yourself delaying something that you would have just handled before. And then you need to take care of it immediately. And that's going to keep that standard from slipping. Let me add this. I'm of the belief that the way that you do one thing is the way that you do everything. So one way that you can train that behavior is this. Instead of washing all the clothes and just letting the basket sit there full of clean clothes, put them up right then. Put them up when you don't feel like doing it. And what you're doing is you're training yourself to do things that you don't feel like doing. Because the way that you respond in these small, seemingly insignificant events is usually the way that you'll respond when life begins demanding more of you. It might mean carrying one more responsibility than you're comfortable carrying and not backing off immediately when it starts getting challenging. And then you stay there consistently enough so it stops feeling uncomfortable to your nervous system. Most people, again, myself included, try to upgrade and change everything all at one time, right? We create 10 new expectations. And then we wonder why we can't sustain it. It's because capacity doesn't build that way. It builds when you raise one expectation for yourself, you live there long enough for it to become normal, and then you raise the next. And that's how your range expands. And then over time, what used to feel hard just feels like how you operate now. Another part of this is learning how to stay in discomfort longer than you're used to. Because the first urge that most people feel when things get uncomfortable is to change something. Change the plan, reduce the workload, take your foot off the gas. But if you keep responding to that urge immediately, then you're training yourself to quit at the exact time where growth requires you to stay locked in. So instead of changing the plan immediately, give yourself a window where you stay with that current load. Even a few extra days of staying engaged starts expanding what you can handle. Now, it's not about doing something new. It's about staying where you already are, just longer. Long enough for your system to catch up. Long enough for that new standard to feel normal. Long enough to prove to yourself that you can handle more. We get stuck repeating the same year and calling it a life because every time life starts asking more of us, we step back into what feels manageable, what feels comfortable, what feels easier. And so we keep restarting, we keep rebuilding, we keep hovering around the same level of life. And the people who actually change their lives, they train themselves to stay engaged when effort feels hard or boring. They don't wait for it to feel easy or enjoyable. They stay there until it becomes normal. If you haven't watched the previous video explaining why this stage happens internally, go start there. And if you're ready to rebuild discipline and raise your standards in a structured way, start with the rebuild in the description. Because real change happens when you stop stepping back every time life asks more of you.